Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the Near Memo with our very special guest, Darby Sieben, a man about town, raconteur, veteran of the local space, and currently the Chief Product Officer of Venerable Landing Pages Solution and more, UnBounce, which is a product that many of you listening to probably use. But we're here today to kind of talk about how UnBounce is starting to integrate AI capabilities, or is in the process of evolving and integrating those capabilities into its products. And they recently came out with a new interesting URL to ads product, which Darby will talk about. And then we want to also do a little bit of kind of speculation about how AI is impacting the broader SaaS space and where it's going to go in the future, which is the subject of everybody's conversation these days. So Darby, I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching know who you are and know your background, but for those who may not be as familiar with it, why don't you give us a little summary overview of where you've been and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Yeah. I'm just having a whole bunch of things run through my head. That's why I'm smiling. But go ahead. Straight
Fair
face.
Enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. All good. Let me just give you a very quick overview of a little bit of my journey. Probably this sounds cliche now, especially when we talk about, the old internet days. Originally my plan in life was to become a computer programmer. And so I enrolled in school after I graduated in the early 90s. To become a programmer, realized 2 years in there was a difference between a good programmer and a great one, and I would never be a great one. And really what that meant was, what it took me 30 minutes to do, my friends could do in 10 or 15. And I'm like, what, if I'm arbitraging time for results, that's not going to be a very good thing.
And now there's no need for programmers at all because it's all going to be done by AI.
That's right. I can maybe actually go back into being a programmer. It might be great.
Right. Prompt engineer.
Absolutely. So dropped out of school, started my first company in the mid-90s. That was really a local-based directory product. At that time, we tried to do something, in the local space. And I learned a lot at that time around you can have a really great idea and a great vision, but we still actually had to promote the fact that the internet was going to be this big thing that businesses need to pay attention to. Sold that organization, worked with Bell Canada for a little bit, bought their assets in Western Canada, built a digital agency that was all focused on tracking traditional media and digital media and how to optimize that. And we focused on, a few different verticals: automotive, furniture, and home services were basically the three verticals in the early 2000s. Eventually, that business was sold to Yellow Pages Group, and I joined YPG to lead their digital transformation in Canada. So I was leading partnership strategy for a brief period. I ran their product shop, and I was with YP for about 13 years, and pretty proud of what we accomplished. We signed the first Google reseller agreement in Canada,
which was, by the way, quite controversial at the time.
Was even more controversial was the fact that we actually licensed the data to launch Google Maps in Canada.
Right, they always gave YP reference in the Google Maps, Canadian YP.
They did, yeah, in Canada. And so, but that was a really interesting journey on how do you take this 100-year-old print company and start to reimagine, what it's going to look like in the digital world. And I would really say the big transformational moment for us was getting the organization to shift from our core business being the printing and distribution of a book to our core business being the aggregation of leads on behalf of an SMB. And as soon as we actually made that particular shift, it allowed us to actually rethink and reimagine the entire business, because now we could actually make our competitors actually partners, and we had to, balance between that fine line. Obviously, we were in bed with some competitors who were coming after our core business, at least on the consumer side.
Meaning Google,
absolutely. But on the servicing of the business end, that's where we really felt we had our unique kind of moat. Build a sales organization, own those relationships, act agnostically across. Hey, Mr. SMB, you need to be with Google, you need to be with Facebook, you need to be with YP. And as long as we're optimizing for results, then it shouldn't matter where the lead's coming from. How do we make that happen? So we actually, I think, successfully transformed YP Canada. From YP, I jumped over to RBC Ventures to lead Ampli, which was their largest venture as part of Royal Bank of Canada, which is Canada's largest bank. I think they're one of the top 10 in the world organizations. And Ampli, from a consumer perspective, was a cashback app linked by credit card. Based on your purchase transactions, we can actually reward you a cashback. But the real underlying thing behind Ampli was actually more on the business side. It was a marketing platform where we didn't have to charge for impressions. We didn't have to charge for clicks. We had built all the targeting engine behind to basically say, look, as a business, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to target. And of course, we saw the transaction, so we knew it was a sale, and then we could reward on that. So we were building a marketing platform on the back end and a consumer-facing cashback app on the front end. That was really successful. Now RBC is actually rolling it into the core of their business under the Avion program, which is really super exciting. And then about a year ago, I started talking to UnBounce as I was transitioning out of Royal Bank. And Felicia, who is the CEO of the company, started to talk about the transformational story of UnBounce, moving from a static landing page company. Our original landing page product was a classic builder, very pixel perfect, static. It was great. We've done wonders with that over the last 13 years, into really transforming to make data as the heart of the business and starting to look at the 25 billion plus visitors who've passed through our landing pages, the 2+ billion conversions, and how do we start to think about the landing page space as a data-driven play as opposed to just a static landing page. So for me, it's kind of another transformational story of how do you go from point A to point B, where you've got a great brand, a great established set of customers, a great problem set, but now you actually need to shift and rethink about how you're actually going to use some of the new technologies like AI to continue to pair what we see as marketer and machine coming together to produce better results.
So talk a little bit about how that's gotten integrated into the UnBounce product strategy. I mean, what have you actually done to bring AI into you've got the smart copy product, you've got the URL to ads product. Talk a little bit about that stuff, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of big product pillars today. We have our first AI product that UnBounce built was actually called Smart Traffic, which was built about 3 years ago. It's been in market and really, really successful. On average, we see about a 30% lift on clients who use Smart Traffic.
And what does it do? What is it?
So the best way I could describe Smart Traffic is this. Most marketers are familiar with A/B testing. And A/B testing usually means I want to, test a couple of variants, and then based on a couple of variants, what's the best performing variant? And that's the one that I'm going to actually use in my marketing campaigns going forward. Smart Traffic is slightly different. Smart Traffic looks at what is the actual best variant based on the intersection of device, time of day, where I'm coming from, source of traffic, etc. So in reality, Smart Traffic, you could have, 9 or 10 or 12 highly producing variants, because if you're coming through Facebook on a mobile device at this time of day, variant 4 is actually the better converting variant. If you're coming from Google on a desktop device at this time of day, another variant is actually right. So think of Smart Traffic as it is not about the best producing variant overall. It is the best producing variant by slices of where that traffic is coming from.
It's a kind of personalization,
yes,
not specific to the individual's intent, history, whatever, but it's a kind of personalization, and also very reflective of what Google's doing with all their automation around their ads.
So in that, did you find a big difference between Android and iPhone, for example, in terms of which converted better, or is it more granular than that?
It can actually get more. It can actually get more granular than that, and it's really hard.
Where do you find the most data or the most impact in? So you go from desktop to mobile platforms, mobile apps, mobile web pages. I mean, where do you see it? The rubber really hitting the road in terms of differences.
Yeah. So where the rubber really hits the road, and it's a hard question to answer, Mike, only because every industry, every type of messaging can be slightly different. So it's hard to point and just say, iPhone produces better than Android, et cetera, because there's a lot of different factors that are within that. But on average, we definitely see some of the big impact pieces. The size of your headline actually does have an impact. The placement of where that headline is. The ability to say, hey, I've got one call to action on the page as opposed to multiple call to actions. Some of that stuff that the user actually ends up seeing actually have a bigger, from our perspective, a bigger impact on conversion than actually necessarily where the source of traffic is. Which leads us to our next big AI project, which has been called Smart Builder. And Smart Builder is our next generation builder. So Classic Builder was what we call kind of our classic pixel perfect. You go in as a designer, you can kind of do everything. Smart Builder is still fairly flexible. We've had to take some controls away from the user in terms of just the pixel perfectness of it. But the trade-off is the entire product that Smart Builder is actually built for both the user. So I can drag and drop, I can move things around, I can make it look exactly the way I want. But underneath it, the whole entire product is actually built as a semantic layer. So we know now from a machine perspective, what the placement of all the content is, what that content looks like, what all the images are. So we can actually see the page from a computer perspective. So we can then start to think about, okay, for this particular user, let's change the headline or let's change the placement of where the image needs to be in order to actually convert. And so our Smart Builder product is both built for a human and for a machine equally, where I would say our traditional builder and most builders on the internet today are mostly built from a human perspective. They don't have that semantic intelligence that gives a computer a clear view of exactly everything that they're seeing on the page. As the user is moving it around, that becomes a bigger challenge. So we've got a thing called, dynamic semantic labeling that allows us to say, hey, if I move a piece over here and here, it's automatically updating that so the ML models can figure it out.
So the semantic layering is down to that this is an image, or is it this is an image of a dentist?
This is an image, and we actually pull all of the keywords out of that image. So it could be a dog looking to the right, sitting on a boat on top of a lake with a mountain.
So you are doing image analysis.
That's right.
Using whatever tools are available. Are you third-party tools like Cloud Vision or something else?
Yeah, we do. We have. I think recognition is one of the tools that we've just started to play with. And then what we do is we take, the base ML layers, and we actually then infuse that on top of all of our conversion data to then figure out, okay, what is the best performing headline? What is the best performing placement? What is the best performing variance? And you can imagine a world that, this is all going to become automatic. So if the user gives us permission, we can start to auto-create variants based on traffic on the fly in order to drive additional conversion for them.
One of the things that's been true of Google's automations, responsive search ads, and other what is the performance max is what I was thinking of. So it's like, brain freeze. Anyway, as Google has implemented more and more AI in the background and more automation, there's been a lot of grousing by the SEO and SEM community about I can do it better. I don't want to give up so much control to Google. And are you guys seeing? I mean, we haven't talked about all your products, but are you seeing general acceptance of these kinds of ceding some control to the machine? Are people comfortable with that, or are they resisting that in some way?
No, I think the comfort level is starting to increase. So UnBounce's view always from day one, and we still hold that today even in the age of AI, is we don't see AI replacing what our marketers do. We just think it as a pairing. And so smart traffic, I'll go back to smart traffic because this is the one that's been in market the longest. I think the mental barrier for smart traffic is more the mental model of the difference between A/B testing and the way that we've actually built smart traffic. And so there's definitely, as marketers get more and more sophisticated and they're trying to figure things out, then they start to explore these other tools. And I think when they start to realize, oh, here's the power of this particular tool, they get more and more comfortable with ceding some of that control around, okay, do I want to, the traditional A/B test, I want to put 50% of my traffic here and 50% of my traffic here.
Right.
Where smart traffic may actually decide 70% is going to go here and 30% is going to go here. And so there's a little bit of a mental barrier on, am I okay to give up that kind of control? But I think once a marketer does, they still control the brand, they still control the messaging, they still control everything else related to that. They're getting more comfortable with ceding some of that control to the machine if the results are there.
Do you find that how big of a sample do you need to get reasonable results? And do most advertisers get to that level of big enough samples that you can get granular enough to make these?
Yeah, so with smart traffic, we can actually start to get really specific on a fairly small base of user traffic to a landing page or to a particular variant. And we're talking under, south of 50 visitors to actually start to have that algorithm kick in and that ML model really kick in to produce results.
But at the page level, not at the sort of device.
That's
not
correct.
At the fully granular level. This is at the highest level of abstraction.
That's correct. So in our world, you have to think of our optimization really at the page level. Some of the models do roll up to more of an aggregate view, but everything is at the individual page level as clients are running campaigns. So the really, really micro businesses, that may have, less than say sub 20 visitors that they can send to a particular landing page, you're not going to get a lot of legs out of, at least the optimization side of AI. You will on the generation side, because generation doesn't matter whether you have one user looking at your landing page or a million. On the optimization end, you need to have some volume going to those landing pages.
Well, you also need to have some way to assess the quality of the generation. And in other words, you can generate something in AI. It may or may not be any fucking good.
That's right.
And,
We'll bleep that out.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely bleep it out.
I'm kidding.
Our official bleeper.
I'm kidding.
I'm the bleep generator.
So social media moderation here at work in real time. Sorry, Mike, I cut you off.
Well, it's just that you need both sides to be working for this to be effective. I mean, just because AI generates it doesn't mean it's good, and you still have to evaluate it. That's all.
Well, so just let's talk a little bit more about where UnBounce is going. I mean, you've got this new URL to ads product. You've got Smart Copy, which can generate, which is generative text. Where do you see the business? How do you see the business sort of evolving with AI? I mean, it's clearly evolving. Where is it going?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we're narrowing in on the use case of, I am a marketer, I am spending money to drive performance, and I'm going to use landing pages in order to make that happen. And so everything that we think about, we're not going to be building horizontal ML models. That's not our gig. We're going to be building vertically based conversion intelligence models using all of our conversion data to really then understand and say, okay, if we're going to recommend a template for you, or we're going to recommend copy for you, we're obviously going to use base layers. We're going to use our data on top in order to tune that prompt, right? And then we're going to give you results that we think are the highest converting results for your particular campaign. And so when we think about smart traffic and smart builder, those two sit within, landing page traffic within our environment. When we think of smart copy, we do use today smart copy inside of our builder, which is all conversion based. We're going to be rolling out conversion based, so I can say, hey, go into smart copy, give me some high converting text for this type of an industry, and we can actually, provide that for you. And then our new URL to ads model was really a test to say, hey, can we actually start to help you, create content, text for your ads based on what we see as conversion data off of our landing pages, what converts as a headline, et cetera. Where we're a little bit blind today is I can take that ad copy, drop it into Google, but I don't know unless I know 100% that you've actually used the exact copy and you're using my landing page, I can't actually make that last mile connection yet. But we have, items on our roadmap to then say, how do we go a little more upstream so we can understand, did you use our recommended ad copy? If the answer is yes, we can validate that. Are you using our landing page? Yes. Now I can start to look at the relationship between ad copy and what's happening on the landing page with all the other factors that we're doing.
Hypothetically, I don't know how many small businesses are using the UnBounce product. I mean, certainly you have small businesses, but when we talk about small business, small business, like the truly small businesses, as opposed to kind of medium, larger businesses that have more sophistication. Um, but here's a hypothetical scenario. So you have somebody show up who wants to run an ad campaign, and they're a lawyer or a dentist or a contractor, and they put in vague descriptions into your smart copy product, or the landing pages product, Smart Builder. Hey, I want to. This is the promotion. This is the ad. It's some seasonal thing, and they sort of vaguely describe it, and you spit out the polished copy, and then they generate automatically based on their website 5 different ad campaigns. You plug into the APIs. They give you a credit card, and boom, the campaign is set up with a very limited expertise. I mean, is that a hypothetically something that you guys are going to pursue, or?
Yeah, I mean, as we think about, where we play, kind of landing page, high converting content, you could imagine a world where we go upstream, which is, hey, where are the sources of that traffic that's coming in, and then we go downstream. And we're actually pretty good today with downstream. We have a lot of connectors with all the CRM tools, because obviously our clients need to be able to pull all the leads into their environment. You can imagine on the downstream, as we get lead scoring back, that's a great input into, UnBounce today helps you find, best converting leads once we have the signal on, best converting customer as defined by the client. Then we can start to actually shift those ML models to focus on the best customer as opposed to necessarily generating the highest volume of leads. But you could definitely see a world where we go higher up, and that'll be through a partner model. We're not going to build all of this ourselves. We're going to partner with organizations, the APIs and what have you. And then you can go downstream where we still see a landing page, and a landing page today is, one page. You could also see a multi-page landing page, which is really just a website. That's kind of in the middle. That's where we're really going to focus. And then we're going to have to make some decisions on how far up and how far downstream we're going to go.
It's an interesting thing to think about product creep in this context, because these tools would enable you, as you're saying, to go upstream and to go further downstream. And so how do you think about that as a business? How far to expand your tool set capabilities?
Yeah, so everything that we do is anchored on one thing and one thing only, and that is, how do we help marketers get a better return on the traffic and the conversion to their particular landing page? So as long as, if we go upstream, that can help us get a better sense of what's going to drive value to a marketer and give them a better ROI, then it's on the table. If it's just something for the purposes of, hey, it's neat to do, that's kind of our lens when we think about product development, is how do we optimize for conversion? Because every, 2-3 points of conversion on 100 visitors could mean big difference for any kind of marketer on that front.
So I have a question. When you're building up and down, we talked a little bit about this in the green room. Do you see it as more cost effective to use your own models or to just plug into an existing model? How do you see that playing out in the future in terms of your own business?
Yeah, so roughly, and when we think of the generation side, what we're doing on the generation end is we're mostly going to be using other people's existing models and then building some customization on top using our own conversion data. When we then start to think about conversion models, again, it's probably going to follow the same pattern. I mean, we did build our own model with smart traffic, and there might be some areas where we will do that, but we do think there's an acceleration for the product roadmap to take an existing model, do some tweaking on top of it, infuse it with our own data and our own knowledge that we have to then produce the results, as opposed to starting completely from.
So who's working in conversion models on that side? We know who's working on the generative side, or we think we know, maybe we don't, but who's doing it then on the other side?
Yeah, so we actually use most of the generative models today, and then we actually use our own conversion data, actually tweak them and adjust them. So if you go into our Smart Builder product and you say, look, I'm a lawyer and I want to focus on callback, We then already pre-populate with a template and all of that is using the base generative models, but then using our conversion intelligence that sits on top of it to then say, we actually know from our 13 years of history and the 20 plus billion visitors that we've seen that this template with this form of text, et cetera, actually performs really, really well. And so let's start there and then we'll tweak that as the marketer starts to drive traffic to that particular landing page.
So is this available to like website, like when you're specking out a website and trying to sort of get a general look and feel? Is your product useful in that context or just at a landing page level? In other words, is it valuable at a site level?
It could be. We are looking at certain aspects of our tools, like say a smart traffic. Could we take that outside of our environment? One of the considerations we need to have there is obviously speed. Right now within our full stack, if you run your landing page within our environment, we have an amazing team here that does a ton of optimization around speed because, as we all know,
big believers in AMP, I would guess.
Oh yeah, these things need to load fast, or that's number one is going to kill your conversion rate if they're slow.
Big believers in speed, but not necessarily AMP.
That's right.
Sarcasm.
Yes.
Well, so I mean, you could hypothetically get into small business web, development. You could this is the product creep question again because there are a lot of web builders for small businesses, but given your conversion data, Google has this very simple web building product rather, and your conversion data would make some version of this product that you guys would produce very compelling immediately, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. And I remember, Greg.
I'm not trying to design your product roadmap for you.
No, but you can think of there is some scale to these models around the notion of, and this is just again we keep things fairly clean, but there's this notion of back in the YP days when we used to talk globally with publishers, a dentist in Toronto and a dentist in Denver and a dentist in Sydney, they almost had all the same kind of elements. And of course, Google, being an international organization, has a view right around that particular area to say, okay, we know how dentists perform. So when you start to think of some ML models at a vertical level, there's a good portion of it where, that dentist in Denver and that dentist in Toronto who don't compete can actually share some of the same insights to actually drive performance on their particular business. And so that's an interesting thing when you start to think about, the verticalization of these models. There are learnings that can actually go across, across the industry that are common across, that are kind of geographically agnostic to some extent. And so that's kind of one way that we think about, some of our custom models. Do I want to opt in potentially for, this particular vertical model, realizing, hey, my data is going to go in, but I'm also going to get data back from the network, which really is one of the big advantages Google has, is they get to see kind of the global picture. Where at the YP business, we only got to see the stuff in Canada, but when we started to compare notes, there was a lot of similarities. So that's kind of one of the ways that we think about our models at UnBounce, because we have an advantage of seeing a large base.
Quick, I want to come back to something that you said, and then we need to move into the sort of final part of our discussion. We can go on and on about all of this, but you talked about sort of relying on, and this was in response to a question that Mike asked you, I think, about what you were using. I mean, AI has been adopted incredibly rapidly. OpenAI came out in November of 2022. Everything is moving incredibly quickly. There probably isn't a SaaS company that exists that isn't integrating some of these tools into their roadmap or into their existing capabilities. And we're seeing announcement after announcement after announcement. Do you feel any vulnerability relying on third parties like OpenAI there is an open source movement. There's Google, which is going to have an API. But do you think, well, as these capabilities become more strategic and important to us, it makes us a little uncomfortable to be relying on a third party who you can't necessarily predict what they're going to do. I mean, witness Twitter's capriciousness in the past around, their API and their, agents and Google is famous for creating products and then discontinuing them. So does that make you nervous at all?
I mean, the short answer is yes, for a couple of reasons. One, you could have massive product changes, and obviously the big platform players are going to learn a lot from all of us that are actually using the toolkits that they have. Then you got to be concerned about pricing. Hopefully, AI is actually going to, cost of accessing these models is
Well,
actually
right.
going
The
to
cost could go up
decrease, but the
unilaterally
cost
really
could go up
quickly.
unilaterally.
Yeah.
And if it does, it's definitely going to impact not only us; it'll impact everybody
Everybody.
that's using these particular areas. So is it a concern? Yes. Is it something right now that guides what we're doing? No, it's definitely top of mind. But we do think as long as we continue to stay very focused on our mission around conversion intelligence and how do we use high, conversion data to inform all of our decisions around what we build and what models we actually end up using, the rest is going to shake itself out. I mean, I'm sure every single chief product officer that's building has their teams building off of these platforms has the same worry. But I guess in some ways, maybe to a lesser extent, it's no different than cloud computing. It's going to probably consolidate down to a few groups, or hopefully the open source movement will really take off, and then that'd be a huge advantage for a whole bunch of us.
Unlike cloud computing, which requires massive capital investment, it does appear that there is some potential for this to branch off into a really vibrant open source movement that can
Yep.
leverage less sophisticated devices with fewer training inputs, et cetera, which would make it cheap for everybody, reasonable
That's
for
right.
everybody. And then the value add comes at your level where you're looking strictly at this topic of conversions, or the value add comes at Lead Furno's level of, we've generated this lead. What do we say to them? That kind of stuff. So
That's right.
yeah, that would be
It's
a much more optimal outcome from my point of view, much
it's
like open source was to the web in general.
it's all about the data, really. I mean, you can't say that AI is any kind of a commodity at this point, but these the uh, the proprietary data on top of AI is what's gonna be really valuable over time. I think that the IP that you guys have that you can bring, or that whomever has can bring to the proposition of content generation or conversion intelligence or whatever the particular context is. I mean, I think that's where the value lies, even though you
Yeah, I
do
mean,
need this foundational layer enabled.
in a summary, Greg, I think, if I really simplify it, I think there's going to be three big drivers of differentiation. I think one is, as you said, the data. How are you collecting it? Is it structured in the right format? How are you using it? I think two, in the age of AI, trust and the value of your brand is going to start to play a really, really big piece in this. And then third, is how do you take all of the love of the technology and put it behind and create really amazing user
Yeah,
experiences that input. And so I think it's going to be data, brand, and user experience
UX.
are
Yeah,
going to be, the three big things that are going to differentiate, the winners and the losers going forward.
I totally agree. So any predictions before we go about, not predictions as in sort of these facile end of year predictions, like I predict that so and so will be, here are the top six things. But like, where is all this going? I mean, I'm struck again and again and again in the SaaS world. I mean, I'm struck repeatedly by how fast all of this is moving. I mean, there's really never been anything comparable. I mean, we've all been around since the beginning of the internet and working in various capacities in technology, and there's never been anything comparable to this. I mean, search existed for a long time. Google
Yep.
came in as a late entrant and improved it incrementally, or improved it dramatically, and gained momentum over time. This is like, the precursors to all of this are decades in the making. Natural language processing and neural networks and all of this builds on decades and decades and decades of research. But in terms of the appearance of the product, it's like boom, and now we're going at 60 miles an hour, and it's just kind of mesmerizing and fascinating to me. And so, how does this impact the SaaS world? I mean, what do you think is how is this all going to shake out? Just everybody will have their generative thing that they do, their tool. I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, here's kind of the way that we think about it. And this is, my view on this. I think there's a couple of really key pieces that AI can do for any SaaS company. One, it's going to create, um, faster, better experiences. And really, what I mean by faster and better experiences, how do you shrink the number of clicks that it took you before to go from A to B? And maybe that was 6 or 7 steps. Now I can go to A to B, and it's actually in 1 or 2 steps. So I think every organization needs to start to be thinking about that workflow and how this is going to impact the workflow and how do I really shrink those number of steps down, which, earlier comes back to my third point, which is really the UX and the design side of it. I think you've really got to get in tune now to, really understanding your client's needs, really understanding, how to enable all of the toolkits and the noise in order to get them faster to go from here to here. I do think in this evolution of it, I think you're going to have some companies, if they're not really crisp on what problem they're trying to solve, could get lost in the boy, here's all the exciting stuff you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do,
yeah.
as opposed to getting really, really narrow on what is the thing that creates the highest value for my end customers. And so it'll be really interesting to see, what's going to happen between horizontal-based SaaS companies that are trying to, create a toolkit that can service everybody to the really vertical ones. I think the horizontal ones, though, generative AI allows the horizontal ones to actually get vertical quicker. The question for the vertical ones is, can they actually become more of a horizontal platform, which is actually kind of interesting as well. UnBounce, we see ourselves as a horizontal platform focused on one vertical issue, which is conversion intelligence. But whether you're a plumber or whether you're a major multinational brand, this notion of optimization of a landing page, is kind of ubiquitous and is the same across the board. But I still think it's going to come down to, the data, your brand trust, and those user experience are going to be the three non-AI things that are going to create the winners and the losers, making the assumption everybody's going to have access to the same base layer. They won't have access to the same set of data on top of it, and they won't have access to, the experience and how do you stitch it all together and put it all together.
And final question. Sorry to throw in one more. What does this do to the workforce? I mean, there was an article in Fortune that I posted on LinkedIn where they said, here's the skill set that is missing in the workplace, or here's the most in demand skills. And there were like 10 of them, and seven of them were non-technical, just sort of smart person, customer service and agility and problem solving and things that are the byproduct of just world life experience and a general education. Do you think that AI will de-skill the workforce or create a radical shift in the kinds of skills that people are that companies need in order to do this? In other words, if the technical part of it is buried behind the AI tools, maybe the number of people you need to service those and create those are smaller, and you can you need generalists with customer empathy and those kinds of skills. I mean, what do you think about that?
I tend to, agree with what you've just said there, Greg. I think it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. I do think we're entering a world where, some of those really defined kind of hard skills where AI can really kind of step
Coding,
in.
for example.
Coding is one of them. I still think it's not going to replace humans entirely, and I think that would actually be a very big mistake. But I think if this allows, a good engineer to become a great engineer in terms of coding, then they're going to have to become good to great in other ways around communication. How do I stitch all of this together? How do I think of that higher problem, the higher value problems? I do think empathy, I do think communication skills, I do think some of those really naturally inherent human skills that we can do that machines just right now, at least today, can't do, are going to play a bigger role across all aspects. But I do think there's going to be a little bit of shuffling around. Okay, do we need X number of people to do this job? Maybe we need less. That doesn't necessarily mean that those other people aren't of value. We just might have to find different ways. I also think we're also going to see new types of jobs that we haven't seen before get created out of this.
Prompt engineer, for example. Prompt engineer.
We'll see if that's a fad or if that actually becomes a long-term thing.
Well, I mean, the machines will create the prompts over time, right? You'll be able to say, here's my objective. What's the right prompt for this? Or perhaps it'll just translate it into the appropriate prompt.
That's right.
All right. So we're kind of out of time. I mean, we could keep going on all of this philosophical stuff, but Mike, did you want to say anything to Darby in the end here?
I just thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I think that there's a lot of information you provided that'll help a lot of SaaS companies as well as business and marketers. So it's good. Appreciate it.
I think we'll be talking week after week after week for many, many weeks and months to come about how this is all evolving. I mean, it's as scary as it is, it's one of the most exciting times to be involved with the internet. I was really feeling like I'm bored with all of this just a little while ago. I mean, I was really feeling bored with a lot of stuff that was going on, and we're definitely in a time that is not boring. So that's a good thing. That's something to be grateful for, even as the apocalypse approaches. So,
and I was going to say, on that front, Greg, for a few of us that have been around during a few of these cycles, Web 1 and, Web 2 and 3, and
iPhone.
And the iPhone, this AI movement in the last 6 months has really been something incredible. And I think you're right. I think the future is unprecedented.
Well, this is Web 3. Forget about the federation, Bitcoin and crypto and decentralized blah blah blah. It's still going to happen in the background, but this is what Web 3 is. People will say that was Web 3. Nope, sorry, that was a false start. The metaverse, false start. This is Web 3. Those things can be Web 4, Web 5 when they eventually develop. All right. Well, thanks very, very much, Darby. It was great talking to you. We'll have you back in the future. And everybody, thanks for listening. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.